Today's daf is Chulin daf Pei Aleph, and we are at the very last line on daf Pei Amid Beis Reb Zera Amar. Today's daf is being learned as a schus refuah shalema for Chava Miriam Bas Malka Freda and Shlomo ben Chayaleh. So we're moving along in the fifth perek of Meseches Chulin, perek Oisoi ve'es benoi, which naturally deals with the halachos of Oisoi ve'es benoi. Specifically, we're right in the middle of a cheshbon. The Mishnah on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, the opening long Mishnah to the perek, mentioned 12 different tziyurim where one shechted Oisoi ve'es benoi and laid out what exactly the chiyuvim would be and whether or not the shchita would be a shchita kshera or whether it would be a shchita psula. The Mishnah was juggling many ideas. Number one, was the animal Chulin or was the animal kachim? Number two, did the shchita take place bifnim in the azara or did it take place bachutz, outside of the azara? 12 different variables, permutations, and as a result, a whole bunch of different halachas. The Gemara on Daf Pei Amid Beis, at the end of yesterday's daf, asked the kasha, and that is, in many of the shchitas of the Mishnah, the one that shechts is over the Issa Dairaisa of Oisoi ve'es benoi lois teshchatu b'yomechen, and it's for that reason the Mishnah says that person would be soifig as arba. Freit the Gemara, v'lilki nami mishum lav de mechusas man. To the extent that there's an Isser to shecht Oisoi ve'es benoi, then there should be another Isser when you shecht Oisoi ve'es benoi, and that is, you should be over the lav of lo yeratza. So what exactly is the lav of lo yeratza? It's based on a brisa, which is of course based on a pasuk that says v'shor vaseh sarua, different types of mumin, uleneder lo yeratza, there will not be ritzui in the event that somebody brings a carbon like this. And the brisa says, limeid, we learn from here, al kol apsulin shabashar v'shabaseh, that anything that's considered a psul when it comes to karbanos, if a person would go ahead and be makrivet, if a person would go ahead and he would shecht it, he would be over the slav of lo yiratza. So afraid the Gemara kashin, all the tziyurim of the Mishnah where the person is over Oisoi ve'es benoi, he's being soifik as arbaim. Why is he only being soifik as arbaim? He should be soifik shmoinim. He should be soifik arbaim for Oisoi ve'es benoi lois teshchatu b'yomechen, and another arbaim for v'shor vaseh sarua v'kolot nedava teyasa Oisoi uleneda lo yiratza. That's two different lavin. And the Gemara gave a teretz. The teretz of the Gemara was enochinami. It's true. When a person is over Oisoi ve'es benoi, he's going to be over that lav as well. If that's the case, how come the Mishnah mentioned in all the Oisoi ve'es benois only soifik as arbam, shouldn't it be shmoinim? The reason is because that lav is what the Gemara refers to as lave nuchroi, and we're not talking about any lave nuchroi. We're talking about Oisoi ve'es benoi, not lave nuchroi. Doesn't the Mishnah mention the lav of shchutei chutz and the soifek es arbam for shchutei chutz? That's foreign. If lo yiratza is foreign to perek Oisoi ve'es benoi because it's not focused on the lav de jour, well, shchutei chutz should be the same thing. And for that, the Mishnah gave a technical teretz, and that is that the only time we omit the lav yinuchra is when there's going to be malchus anyways for Oisoi ve'es benoi. Enochinami, to the extent that you're not getting malchus for Oisoi ve'es benoi, then we would invoke lav nuchroi, and that's why the Mishnah in so many of the cases did invoke the lav of shchutei chutz. Either way, that is the first teretz that the Gemara gives to that kasha of velulki nami mishum mechusas man, which means the lav of lo yiratza. The Gemara begins with Reb Zera, who's going to give a second teretz to this kasha again. Why is it that every time a person is over Oisoi ve'es benoi and he has to be soifik es arbam, he has to get malchus for the lav of Oisoi ve'es benoi, that he's not also getting another set of malchus for being over the lav of lo yiratza? Reb Zera said, Hanach l'mechusas man, don't talk to me about getting malchus for lo yiratza when a person is over Oisoi ve'es benoi, meaning when he violates the concept of mechusas man in shchita. The hakas of nitgoy la'aseh. The reason is because the Torah was menatek the lav of Mechusar Zman La'aseh. Now, usually, in almost every single sugi in Shas, when you see this lashon of HaTorah Nitka La'aseh, what you're thinking of is the concept of a lav shenitak La'aseh, which would fit very neatly in this sugya, because the Gemara is asking a kasha, you should be over a second lav, and therefore get an additional set of malchus for the lav of lo yiratza, for the concept of mechusar zman. The teretz is it's nitkar lasei. Oh, it's a lav shenitak lasei. And like that would be a teretz. However, as we're going to see, most of the Rishonim actually do not learn that the Gemara over here means that it's a lav shenitak lasei, and it's based on the language of the Gemara, as we're going to see. But either way, says the Gemara, haTorah nitkar lasei. My timer. What's the makar to this? Because the pasuk says regarding a classic mechusar zman, shara kesef vayeski yival. So, v'hoya shivas yamim tachas imoy u'miyay mashmini v'hala yeirotze lekarben isha la'Hashem. Says the Gemara that from the fact that it says in the end of the pasuk miyay mashmini v'hala yeirotze lekarben isha la'Hashem, we learn from here miyay mashmini in me'ikaraloi that it's only yeirotze lekarben isha la'Hashem if the animal is 8 days old, but me'ikar if it's not 8 days old yet, it's not going to be Mirutze to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is not a loisaseh, it's a lav abba michlalase. It's something that the Torah is telling you not allowed to do, but not by saying thou shalt not do it, but through the medium of aseh. And anytime you have a lav abba michal aseh, all it is an aseh, and that's why there's no special loisaseh of lo yiratze as it relates to the concept of mechusar zman. So what does this mean? So the way Rov the Rishonim learn it, Ayin Rashi's Vachim Kuf Yudalad Amid Beis, Ayin Tosfos here in our Sugya, the Ramban, and other Rishonim. What the Gemara means to say is that these words, Miyoi Mashmini V'Hala Yeratza L'Karben Isha L'Hashem, are extra words. Torah didn't have to say that. And even though that pasuk is telling us a very important halacha that Torah had to say, and that is the first 7 days of the life of an animal, the animal is pasal akrava. It's only from the 8th day on that it's kashal akrava. But I know that without saying miyay mashmina v'hala yeratza, because that's the beginning of the pasuk. V'haya shivas yamim tachazimai. So I know already that for 7 days you can't do anything with this animal. So why does it have to say umiyay mashmini v'hala yeratza l'karben yishal Hashem? You know what's coming to say? That in the event that somebody would violate this halacha of v'haya shivas yamim tachazimai, he would be over, in addition to that, an asay of miyay mashmini v'hala yiratza l'karben ishal Hashem. Didn't I technically know that from the Hayashivas Yamam Tachasimai? Yeah, I knew you were over an asay, but I didn't know that you're only over an asay. From the fact that the Torah now emphasizes V'Hayashivas Yamim Tachasimai Umiyay Mashmini V'Hala Yiratza L'Karben Ishal Hashem. The Torah is telling me an asay twice, La'ashmi'inan U'Lahidiyacha, that all you're over is an asay. You're not going to be over lois asay. Which lois asay would you think you would be over? La Yiratza. That's a general lois asay that all the psulei shchita you're over a lav of lo yiratza. Kamash over here, you're not over the lo yiratza. So again, what was the Gemara's kasha? The Gemara's kasha was that why are you not seifek shmoinim 40 for oisay ve'esbenai and another 40 for lo yiratza? And by the way, we should have spoken this out right away. The only time you're over the other 40, the only time you would think there would be another malchus is when the Oisev Espanoi is Kachim related. Obviously, if it's not Kachim, then you're not going to be over the lav of Leirotza. But Al Kapanim, in all the cases in the Mishnah where there's Oisev Espanoi and it's Kachim, why are you only getting malchus for Oisev Espanoi? You should get malchus for that as well. The teretz is, there's no malchus of Leirotza when it comes to Mechusar Zman. Because in the parish of Mechusar Zman, the Torah gave me this extra asay to teach me all Mechusar Zman is a lav abab Michal asay. It's not a regular lois asay, that's why you're not going to get malchus. This drasha of akas of nitkar laseh is predicated on the fact that these words miyay mashmini v'hal yiratz l'karben ishal Hashem are extra, and they seem extra because really the concept of miyay mashmini v'hala I know from the beginning of the pasuk. Sharei kesef hayeski yivalid v'haya shivas yamim tachazimai u'miyay mashmini v'hal yiratz. That seems very redundant. For 7 days, you can't do anything. Obviously, from the 8th day, you can. Being that it's extra, it's coming to teach me. All this is a lav abba michal asay. All it is an asay. You're never going to get malchus lo yiratza for violating mechusar zman. But the Gemara says it's not extra. I needed to teach me what Rav Avturiki darshan from this pasuk. Rav Avturiki wrong. Rav Avturiki asked the stira. The pasuk says vayeshivas yamim tachazimai. What does it sound like? Hot laila. But the night that follows the 7th day, chazi. At that point, the animal's already roid lahakrava. Uksiv, but then the pasuk says miyoi mashmini v'hala yeratza. And what's that mashma? Miyoi mashmini v'hala in laila lai. It sounds like it's only from the 8th day, not the night before. Okay, there's a stira. So Rav Afturiki said, I have a stira in the mashmoyis of the psukim from the beginning of the pasuk to the end of the pasuk. What's the status of the 8th night? Sounds like the 8th night is good. Sounds like it's only from the 8th day that it's good, which means the 8th night is not okay. Said Rabbi Abturiki, this is how you have to reconcile the stira. Laila l'kedusha, the 8th night already, you could be makdish it, yom la'arza, but it's only from the 8th day that you could actually bring it as a carbon. Now, what exactly this means is not so much our sugya, but the point is, Rabbi Abturiki already used the words umiyom hashmini v'hala yeratza to teach me that there's a very important idea that even though from the 8th night you could already be makdish the animal, but as it relates to ritzu, you're not going to get any ritzu from this animal until the 8th day. So how could you tell me that umiyem hashmini v'hala yeratza is extra to teach me what? That all this is lava b'michal aseh hakasav nitkoy laseh. I need it for a Afturiki, as the Gemara ksiv kra achrina. There's another pasuk that's very similar to this pasuk, and this is actually way back in Parsha Shmos, meaning the pasuk over here of Mechusas Man is in Parsha Zemar. Those are the three ideas, kachim related, that are tucked away in the middle of Parsha Zemar. But the truth is another pasuk, and that pasuk says as follows: King Tassel l'sharcha l'tzoynecha, shivas yomim yiyeh imoy mi bayoyim hashmini titnoili. Same exact idea that's expressing itself in this pasuk. That for the first 7 days, an animal is yiyeh im imay. It's tafka b'yoyim hashmini titnuli that you can bring it as a carbon. Rab Afturiki's Rami was on that pasuk, not on the pasuk we're handling over here. It's not in the pasuk of Parshas Emor. It's in Shmos Chav Beis. It's in the pasuk of Parshas Mishpatim. That's what Rab Afturiki's halacha was discussing, and it's for that reason the pasuk of Miyayim Hashmini V'Hala Yeratz and Parshas Emor is still extra. What's it coming to teach me? What it's coming to teach me is Hakasav Nitka. I say, bottom line is, this concludes the first part of today's daf, which was very much a conclusion of the end of yesterday's daf, which was this Greis Akasha. That why is it in the Mishnah when a person's over Oisav Esbenai with an animal of Kachim, he's Soifig Arba'im, L'chayri should be Soifig Shmoinim, because he's being over the lav of the Shor Vaseh, Sorua v'chulu lo yeratza, and we learn from there kol apsulin shebeshar v'shebeseh shu b'lo yeratza. So oisav esbenai should be included in that. It's mechusas man oisav esbenai. So why isn't it that you're not getting malchus also if you're being over the lav of lo yeratza? The first teretz of the Gemara was a little bit of a balabatish teretz, and a chanami. Really, you could have said it, should have said it, and would have said it. But it's lav nuchra. It's a foreign lav. We're not talking about foreign lav, and we're trying to focus on oisav ve'esbenai. Reb Zeira said a molamdish teretz. He said of nitkoy laaseh, that this is different. That even though limit al kol apsul shu b'lo yiratza, but not the psul of mechusas man. The psul of mechusas man is different. Where do you see that? From the fact that it says uyem hashmini b'hal yiratza. Don't I need that for Rabbi Afturiki? No, Rabbi Afturiki was referring to in his drush a very similar pasuk in Shmos Chav Beis. This is not the pasuk that Rabbi Afturiki was referring to. It's just two things, very very simple. Number one, this pasuk of Miyay Mashmini B'Hali Yeratza, this pasuk of Mechusas Man, is talking about the idea that until an animal is 8 days old, you can't bring it as a carbon. We're discussing Oisai Vespenai, which is not the same lav. But the teretz is, Kemavur in the entire parak Oisai Vespenai, that Oisai Vespenai is a Mechusas Man de Gepsel. Rashi spoke it out big time in the Mishnah, but really it's something that's being malavas throughout these Gemaras. And that is that Oisai Vespenai is a Mechusas Man de Gehalacha. So once I have a Kas of Nitke Laseh with regards to Mechusas Man, albeit the Mechusas Man of 7 days versus the 8th day forward, so too as it relates to Oisai Vespenai, that's a Psul Mechusas Man, right? Mechusas Man, today I can't bring it, but tomorrow I will be able to bring it. So if Hakasav Nitka Laseh regarding Vayashivas Yam and Tachasim, so too Hakasav Nitka Laseh as it relates to the idea of Oisai Vespenai. The second thing that's worth mentioning is that we said that Pasha, you learn the Gemara, Hakasav Nitka Laseh sounds like it's about to say Lava Nitka Laseh. But Rav Rishonim don't learn that way, based on the lashon of the Gemara. So where in the Gemara do you see that it's not your classic Lav Shenitka Laseh? So just in the Gemara that we learned. The Gemara said, my time. Where's that cost of Nitka Laseh? Dam Makrabi Yem Hashmini B'Hali Yeratze, Yem Hashmini in Mei Karoloi, Lava Ba Michla Laseh Aseh. Right, that's the punchline of the Gemara. This is a Lava Ba Michla Laseh. Lava Ba Michla Laseh. That's not what we're discussing. I thought we're discussing this is a lav shin nitik laseh. Lav shin nitik laseh means that after I'm over the lav, I have a way to farech the lav. I could be mesakin the lav by going ahead and doing an aseh. That's not what the Gemara said in the Maitaima. What the Gemara said in the Maitaima is that this lav of mechusas man is not a regular lav, it's a lav abba michal aseh. And that's why all the Rishonim kamat say that even though the lashon of Akasim Nitka Laseh sounds like it's invoking, the third parak in Masechtas Makis, the sugyas of Lav and Nitka Laseh, but it can't mean that in our sugya, because you see that what the Gemara feared over here is that this is a lav abba michlal aseh, stating that if you go through Gemara Rashi, which obviously is the right way to learn Gemara, Rashi clearly learned that this is a lav nitak laseh. Did Rashi have a different gersa? So you have to go through Rashi a little bit better, innovating. So the way we just learned the Gemara, disclaimer is really the like Rashi. It's like Rashi in Zvachim, Kuf Yud Dalet Amud Beis, in Perek Paras Chatas, but it's not like Rashi right here on the Gemara, Chulin Daf Pei Aleph. Either way, we now turn our attention to part 2 of today's daf, which, by the way, is also a continuation of yesterday's daf. So a big part of yesterday's daf, the Gemara discussed Shitas Reb Shimon. Who's Reb Shimon? Reb Shimon has a Shita that Shchita she'ena re'uya lo yishma Shchita. By the way, this Shitas Reb Shimon is mentioned throughout Shas. The Mekar to Reb Shimon is a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah in Perek Oisai Vesbenoi. It's on Amud Beis of today's daf. So we're really going to see the source to this very, very well-known Shitas Reb Shimon in a matter of moments when we turn the page. But Shitas Reb Shimon was discussed already in great detail in yesterday's daf, specifically as it relates to our Mishnah. So again, our Mishnah discussed the lav of Oisei Vesbenoi, said Ketzad, 12 different tziyurim, juggling the ideas of Kachem and Chulin, Pnim and Chutz, etc., etc. And Reb Oshia, in yesterday's daf, made a comment. Kula masnisim like Reb Shimon. Not masnisim like Reb Shimon. That's something you find almost every day when you learn Daf Yomi. But kula masnisim like Reb Shimon. The ganze Mishnah schreis from the rooftops that this is like Reb Shimon. And he went out and he delineated all the different rayas and the Mekairis, some a little controversial, where you see that kula masnisim amish from Kappas feast. This whole Mishnah is the like Reb Shimon. This Gemara that we're about to learn right now is very much a continuation of that theme. Just to set it up, the Gemara is going to bring a memra that Rav Hamnuna said, as it relates to Shitas Reb Shimon and the sugya of Oisei Vesbenoi. Rava is going to ask a kasha on what Rav Hamnuna said in the name of Reb Shimon, and because of that, Rava is going to tweak what Rav Hamnuna must have meant when he said what he said in the name of Reb Shimon, which means we're going to have a Rav Hamnuna version 1.0 and a Rav Hamnuna version 2.0. Either way, with that little bit of an introduction, I'm a Rav Hamnuna 1.0. I'm a Reb Shimon. Rav Hamnuna said that Reb Shimon used to say, not Reb Shimon Oimer, but Oimer Hoy Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon in Yiddish, Fleig Zugin, right? This is something that was Margala Bapumes. If you met the holy Tana Reb Shimon, this is something that very often would come out of the holy mouth of Reb Shimon. He used to say, Ein Oisei Vesbenoi Noyeg Bekachem, that the laws of Oisei Vesbenoi are not Noyeg Bekachem. No Oisei Vesbenoi when it comes to Kachem. My time. What's the reason for this? Rav Hamnuna explained. Keep it on Reb Shimon. It's based on Reb Shimon L'Shitas. Because being that Reb Shimon Shchita She'ena Ruya, Lo Ishma Shchita. Being that Reb Shimon is of the opinion that a Shchita She'ena Ruya is not a Shchita. So Shchita's Kachem Nami Shchita She'ena Ruya. So it's for that reason that Shchita's Kachem is not Shchita Ruya, and it's for that reason there is no Oisei Vesbenoi when it comes to Kachem. So again, this is going to be two versions of exactly what Reb Shimon meant. But in the first version, Rav Hamnuna is saying that Omer Hoy Reb Shimon, there's never Oisei Vesbenoi by Kachem. You know why? Because what does Oisei Vesbenoi state? That you're not allowed to shecht the mother and her child, or maybe even the father and his child, b'yomecha. But the basic halacha is you can't do a shchita on the mother, you can't do a shchita on the child. Reb Shimon has a shita that shchita she'ena re'uya lo yishma shchita. Amar Rav Hamnuna, Reb Shimon held that every shchita's kachem is lo yishma shchita. Why would shchita's kachem be lo yishma shchita? Right. Shaila, it's avoida, lava avoida, but loishma shchita? How can you have such a concept of loishma shchita? The teretz is because in order for a shchita to be a shchita ruya, we'll see it in the Mishnah on Amid Beis when we get to the makar of Shitas Reb Shimon. The shchita has to be mater the basar la'achila. If a shchita is not mater basar la'achila, that's not a shchita. Shchita's kachim alone is not mater basar la'achila. When does kachim become mutar ba'achila? When you do a shchita and then you do the kabbalah and the ilacha and then you do the zrika, right? It's the zrika that's matter the basal achila. So being that shchitas kachim is not matter basal achila, so this is a shchita sheni roy. It's no different than if you shechted a treifa, which is a shchita sheni roy because it wasn't matter the basal achila. So shchitas kachim, amazingly, counterintuitively, is also a shchita sheni roy, and it's for that reason. If you shecht the mother kachim, well, there's no issue to shecht the child. You know why? Because the shchita of the mother was loishma shchita, because it was a shchita sheni ruya. Again, it's only Reb Shimon that holds it as the shchita sheni ruya loishma shchita. But the bottom line is, in Reb Shimon's world, where shchita has to be ruya, shchita's kachim is not ruya, and being that it's not ruya, it's for that reason there would be no isna to go ahead now and to shecht the mother. Now, if this idea sounds familiar, this was very much discussed already in yesterday's daf. This chiddush, this idea, this concept that it could be shchitas kachim would be considered shchita she'ein ruya, and therefore, according to Reb Shimon, you would never be over oisei bes benai if the shchita was a shchita of kachim. But the Gemara says, Masav Rava. Rava asked the kasha, Rav Hamnuna said, from a brisa. Now, just to set this part of the Gemara, the brisa that Rav is going to bring now is going to be a little bit cryptic. Rav is going to do what the Amayram did, a little bit of reconstructive surgery on the brisa, and then when we complete the surgery, then we're going to come full circle and understand exactly what Rava means to ask. So, from where Masav Rava begins until we get to the kasha, we have to do a little bit of work. So Masav Rava asked the kasha from a brisa. The brisa says as follows: Oisei vesbenoi. When it comes to the lav of Oisei vesbenoi, kachim bachotz. In the event that they were both kachim, and somebody went and shechted both of them bachotz. Reb Shimon says sheni beloisase. The second person that shechted the kachim bachutz is going to be over a loisas. Shoy Reb Shimon, because Reb Shimon used to say, "Kol roy lavoi lachas man." Anytime somebody shechts kachim bachutz, which right now is not roy lavoi bifnim, but at some point in the future, lachas man, it's going to be roy lavoi bifnim. Even though you're not chayav the isik kares of shchutei chutz, a bareu beloisase you're going to be over a loisase ve'ein by kares. It's just that there's not going to be kares. The chachamim say kol she'ein by kares. Anytime there's no isik kares by shchutei chutz, ein beloisase you're not over a loisase either. Either way, this is the brisa. Now, really, this brisa is mentioned in Perak Ashaychet V'Amayla prominently. It's a very important shittas Reb Shimon when you're learning those sugyas. So one of the basic halachas of shchutei chutz is the only time a person's over shchutei chutz is if the animal that he shechted b'chutz he could have brought into the Beis Hamikdash and shechted b'fnim. If it was roi lava al pesach al moed, then you're over for shechting b'chutz. If it was not roi lava al pesach al moed, you're not going to be over b'chutz. Stating that Reb Shimon holds that if you have an animal that right now is not roi lava al pesach al moed, but b'meshach hazman, it will be roy lavei al pesach hayamayit. In that situation, the halach is that even though if you shech the bachutz, you won't be over this a chorus, because right now it's not roy lavei al pesach hayamayit, but the loisaseh of shchutei chutz, which we saw in our Mishnah, is a big deal. That's something you will be over. Chacham say no, kol she'ein by chorus, ein by loisaseh. So what's the machlokes of Shimon and Chachamim? If someone's over shchutei chutz with something that's not roy lavei al pesach hayamayit now, but b'meshach hazman it will be roy lavei al pesach hayamayit. So the halach is in that situation you're over the loisas. According to Chachamim, you're not. According to Reb Shimon, you can make a yachloiku between the kares and the loisas. You're going to be over the loisas. So the brisa took this shitas Reb Shimon, the machlokes Reb Shimon, the Chachamim in Perek Ashaychet V'Amayla, and it shtelled it to our sugya. Again, how so? So let's read the words of the brisa. If somebody went ahead and he shechted oisei vespenoi, they were both kachim and they were both bachotz. So as it relates to the first shchita, that's easy. That's shchutei chutz, that's kares, that's malchus, that's pasol, that's the worst of the worst. What about the second one? So, in the din of our Mishnah, as it relates to the second one, even though it was kachim achutz, you're not going to be over shchutei chutz. And the reason is, because once you shecht oisai, so benoi is mechusr zman. If it's mechusr zman, it's not roi lavei b'fnim. If it's not roi lavei b'fnim, so at that point, if you shecht b'chutz, you won't be over shchutei chutz. You will be over, however, the Isser of Oisev Esbenai, so you'll get Malkus Oisev Esbenai, and naturally it's going to be possible, because Kachim Bachutz is obviously going to be possible. Good. Rav Shimon says in the Brisa that the second guy, or if it's the same person, the second Shchita, the Shchita Benai, is going to carry with it a Loisase, not Oisev Esbenai. It's going to carry with it a Loisase of Shchutei Chutz. Why is it going to carry through a loisei of Shchutei Chutz? Because even though it's not Roy Lava Bifnim now, but tomorrow it's going to be Roy Lava Bifnim. All it is Mechus Zman. And that's Reb Shimon Shita. Kol Roy Lava La'achar Zman. Anytime it could have been Roy later, even though now it's not Roy, and that's enough to say there's no Karas. Or Barei B'loisa say there's going to be a Loisa. Say, push it. It's a very obvious sushtel of that Shitas Reb Shimon HaShechet V'Amayla to the sugyas of Oisev Esbenai. Aber Rava continues talking. The Kashalan says Rava. The Bnei Yeshiva sat down, they learned this Brisa, and they had a bumba kasha. They had no way to make sense of this kasha. You know why? Because who's the one that said you're going to be over a loisa? Say Reb Shimon. We know Reb Shimon has another big shita. Reb Shimon's shita is shchita she'ena ruya loisa shchita. So let's see it inside. Kachem bachutz she'eni beloisa say. Is it only Loisa say that the second guy is going to get? L'chayra, he should be over kares. You know why? Because kama mikdal katal. A shchita of kachem achutz. Is that a shchita ruya? Of course not. That's a ein l'cha shchita she'en ruya gedayla mizu. He killed the animal for all intents and purposes. He put a bullet between its eyes. He didn't go ahead and shecht it. And if that's the case, sheni mekabel b'fnimmo. That means the sheni is not a mechus zman. Because when do you have oisav esbenoi? If you shecht the mother, you can't shecht the child. But the shchita of the mama is kivin kan shchita. It was a mikdal katal, but not a shchita. If that's the case, there's no mechus zman. If there's no mechus zman, kares nami l'chayiv, yishoyu so chayiv kares. So beautiful tzushtal conceptually of Reb Shimon in the world of hashaychet v'amayla to the sugya of oisav esbenai. Oh, but there's another Reb Shimon fake Rava. What about the other Reb Shimon? What about Reb Shimon that all shchita she'ena ruya lo yishma shchita? So if the mother was a shchita's kachem achutz, it's not a real shchita, it's not a real shchita. So there's no mechus zman because there's no isayisav esbenai. So now the sheni is a regular makabel b'fnim. There should be a chiyuv kares. So Amar Rava said, "Ami lakadi," and some say we don't know who said. We have to do a little bit of surgery to this price. There's no way to take this price at face value because it makes no sense. Reb Shimon l'shitazi ol shchita she'ena ruya lo yishma shchita could hold this. Okay, so what does the price mean? It's a little bit of a longer brisa. What the Brisa is saying is false. Kachim, in the event somebody shechts oisay vesbenoi, and both of them were kachim. So shnei bachutz, in the event that both of them were bachutz, l'rabbanon, according to the rabbanon, rishon anush kares. The first one is going to be kares, that's regular kachim bachutz. Ushneini pasol. The second one is going to be pasol. Meaning the first one obviously is going to be pasol. The second one is also going to be possible. However, upatim ilav the shchutei chutz. You'll be patim from the kares of shchutei chutz and from the lav of shchutei chutz. Why? Because once you shech the mother, at that point there's an issa oisay vesbenai, and being that there's an issa oisay vesbenai, the child is now not roy lava b'fnim. It's not roy lava b'fnim. There's no issa shchutei chutz. Now, by the way, there will be an issa oisay vesbenai, but patim means milav the shchutei chutz, right? The Reb Shimon, however, according to Reb Shimon, shnei manushim kares. Both sheichtim are going to be chayiv kares. The first one shechted a regular kachim achutz, that's easy, and even the second one, according to Reb Shimon, is a regular shchutei chutz. Why? Because even though you shechted the mother, but being that shchita she'ena ruya lo yishma shchita, we look at it as kama mikdal katal, so the child is not subject to the isra of oisav esbenoi leisa shchat to be a mechus. You never shechted the mother, so it's not mechus zman. If it's not mechus zman, it's roy lava b'fnim. It's a regular roy lava b'fnim. Regular roy lava b'fnim. It's the zelba shchutei chutz as I the mama, and as a result, shnei manushim kares. They're going to be chayiv kares. What would be if it was echad b'chutz echad b'fnim? If the first shchita, the mother happened b'chutz, and the second one happened b'fnim. So the rabbanon according to rabbanon rishon anush kares. That's easy. That's regular shchutei chutz. Sheni pasnol. The second one is going to be puzzle. Why is the second one going to be puzzle? Because even though the second one was now b'fnim, but it's a mechus zman. Being that it's mechus zman, so the second one is going to be puzzle. And by the way, the Rabbanon don't hold shchita she'ena ruya lo yishma shchita. So the fact that the mother was shachut b'chutz, that doesn't make the child not a mechus zman. So the second one's going to be puzzle. Upater, however, he's going to be pater for the second one. Pater meaning from the isser of shchutei chutz, right? As it relates to the child, there's going to be no shchutei chutz. Why is there no shchutei chutz? Well, for starters, because it happened b'fnim, so that's a reason for it not to be shchutei chutz. By the way, Rashi speaks out that avada you'll be chayiv for oisay vespanai. Potter just means as it relates to the lav of shchutei chutz. The Reb Shimon, what about according to Reb Shimon? Again, where the first one was bachutz and the second one was b'fnim. So the first one bachutz, that's easy, that's regular shchutei chutz. The sheni, the second one is going to be kosher. Why is the second one going to be kosher? Right, kosher, full stop kosher. And the reason is because there's no oisay vespanai, there's no mechus hazman. Because the first one was a shchita sheni ruya, kamen mikdal katel, sheni mekabel b'fnimhu, and you did it b'fnim. Being that you did it b'fnim, so it's going to be kosher. The third case is what we need. What would be if it was echad b'fnim, the echad b'chutz? So again, in the first case, they were both b'chutz. The second case, the first was b'chutz, second was b'fnim. Hatzad hashava between the first two cases, the first one was done b'chutz, which according to the Chachamim means nothing, klapi the second one, because shchita she'eni ruya shma shchita. According to Reb Shimon, it's game over as it relates to Osav Espanai for the second one, because shchita she'eni ruya lo shma shchita. But what would be in the reverse? What would be if they were both kachim and it was echad b'fnim, echad b'chutz? The first one was b'fnim, and the second one was bachutz. So Rabbanan according to Rabbanan Rishon kasha. The first one's kasha. That was done mahadrin, mina mahadrin. It was echa b'fnim. This was mamish ma'iridig. Ooh, potter. Obviously, there's nothing to be chayiv for. Vishneni pasnal. As it relates to the second one, it's going to be puzzle. Again, the second one that was bachutz is going to be puzzle. Why is it going to be puzzle? Because you shechted kachim bachutz, right? So obviously it's going to be puzzle. Ooh, potter. However, you'll be potter from the isurim of shchutei chutz. Again, you'll be chayiv oisav es benai, but you'll be potter for shchutei chutz. Why? Because it's not roi lava b'fnim. Why is it not roi lava b'fnim? Because it's mechus hazman. The Reb Shimon, however, according to Reb Shimon, shein b'loy saseh, the second one's going to be over loy saseh. He's not going to be chayiv karis. Why is he not going to be chayiv kares? Because he's not roi lava b'fnim. Why is he not roi lava b'fnim? Because it's a mechus hazman. Why is it a mechus hazman? Because you shechted the mother. So right now it's an oisay vesbenai, but at the same time you will be over loisase, and that's Reb Shimon l'shitaz in Berak Hashoychad v'Amayla. There shahayi Reb Shimon Oymed. This is also Reb Shimon Fleig Zogan. Kol haroi lava l'achazman arei b'loisase. That's enough for you to be over a loisase. In other words, what Rava just said is that there's a price over here that tells to Reb Shimon and Hashoychad v'Amayla to the sugyas of Oisav Esbenai. When you read the Braisa at face value before this super edit, it sounds like the case is where you shechted the mother bachutz, and now you're going to go and you're going to shech the child bachutz. That over there you have this Reb Shimon that even though it's not roi lavoi b'fnim mamish, you're not going to be chayiv kares, but at the same time you're going to be over a loy saseh. Rava said that's not tenable, because if you shechted the mother bachutz, it was a shchita she'ein ruya, ben benoishel shchita she'ein ruya, and if that's the case, there's no question the child is roi lava b'fnim, and if that's the case, kares nami l'chay. So the case must be talking about where we're telling to this Reb Shimon and Hashoychad v'Amayla to Osav Esbenai, where you didn't shech the mother bachutz, where there was a proper shchita. So what was the case? The case is where you shechted the mother b'fnim, and now you're shechting the child bachutz. Where you shechted the mother b'fnim, so that shchita was a proper shchita. It's not a shchita she'ein ruya. Narvas, the child is not roi lava b'fnim because it's mechus hazman. But it will be roi lava b'fnim tomorrow, right? So Reb Shimon l'shitasa kol haroi lava l'achazman arei b'loy saseh. It's for that reason going to get malchus, right? Klor. What did Rava do? Rava just took the Braisa from its face value, which sounds like the case of where you shechting bachutz, where it's negate the tishtaltzu the machlekes Rishon the chachamim and Hashoychad v'Amayla, is where you shechted the mother bachutz and now you're shechting the child bachutz. Can't be, because that case for sure Reb Shimon would hold you chayiv kares on the child. The case must be talking about where you shechted the mother b'fnim and you only shechted the child bachutz. Over there, the shchita of the mother was a proper shchita. Now the shaila is, this child's a mechus hazman. So what's the status? It's a good sushta. Reb Shimon the Chacham have a machlokes, where something is not ravin lavoi now, but it will be roi lavoi later. So whether or not that's considered roi lavoi al kapanim for a malchus, or it's not considered roi lavoi al kapanim for a malchus. At face value, the Braisa was talking about this one case, mother bachutz, child bachutz. Rava felt he had to do a little bit of work over here, so he created three cases. He created this whole category of mother and child, pnim and chutz. The first case was both bachutz. Second case was mother bachutz, child b'fnim. Both those cases he canceled through Reb Shimon, because the minute the shchita of the mother was bachutz, as it relates to the child, it's a regular roi lava b'fnim. In the world of Reb Shimon, that shchita shein roi loish mashchita. It's the third case, mother b'fnim, child bachutz. That's where it's going to be negeya. Gevaldig. This is the Braisa. Bottom line. What did Rav Hamnuna say? Oy mehoy Reb Shimon, ein oisev es b'noi noig b'kotchim ever. He said that when it comes to kotchim, there's never an oisev es b'noi. Why is it? It's being that shchitas kotchim itself is not matzah b'asa b'achila. It has to come on to this rika. So it's always a shchita she'nei ruya. Freik Rav of Yisrael gedaitach if you're going to tell me. Ein oisev es b'noi noig b'kotchim the way Rav Hamnuna said it. Sheni amay b'loi sasei v'suloi. Why is it that the sheni, even after my edit, is only over a loy sasei? Because even though when you shechted the mother, you shechted a bifnim, but it's still a shchita she'eina ruya. Why was it a shchita she'eina ruya? Because the shchita wasn't matzah the basar. It needed this rik in order to be matzah the basar. So if that's the case, my ahani, all the editors, bitakantayu, to go ahead and edit the Bryce, you still have a problem. And the Bryce has to mean something. Rava said, I knew this Bryce needed a little bit of surgery. You had to say that the case where Shimon is negeya is where the mother's shchita was al kavanah b'fnim. But it's only going to work if you're at least willing to say that. If you're going to tell me that when you shecht b'chutz, it's a shchita she'eina ruya, that's posh. But even when you shecht b'fnim, it's a shchita she'eina ruya. While the shchita alein is not matter, it's the zrika that's matter, then there's no way to make sense of this price. And this price has to make sense. And it's because of this bomb kasha that Rava asked. Elama Rava said, Hachi ka'amar Rav Hamnuna. I'm going to tell you what I think Rav Hamnuna really meant to say. What he meant to say was, ein malkus, there is no malchus for oisoi ve'es b'noi b'kotchem. Not in oisoi ve'es b'noi noyeg b'kotchem. That's not true. I know mefurish from this brayso that Reb Shimon holds that if you shech the mother b'fnim, it's considered a shchita. So that if you would shech this child now on the same day, there's no question you would be over the isser of oisoi ve'es b'noi. But shchitas kotchem is considered a shchita ruya. The shchita itself is not matter, but the shchita with the zrika is matter. So for that reason, it's going to be okay. Okay, so what did Rav Hamnuna mean? Rav Hamnuna meant something else. He meant to say there's no malchus oisev es b'nei b'kotchem. What he meant to say was that in the event that you would check the mother, let's say the mother was even chulin, you'd go ahead and you would check the mother, and now somebody would go and he would want to shech the child. So you'd say, for sure it's aser. The child, this is going to be oisev es b'nei. In the event that the child is kotchim, there's not going to be malchus for oisav es benai. Issa oisav es benai? I'm not saying there's no issa oisav es benai, but there's not going to be malchus for oisav es benai. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because kiv and the kamet loy zorik dam loy mishteri basa. Because being there, Reb Shimon has a shita she'eina ruya lo yishma shchita. Shchita's kotchim. Even if you want it to be a shchita ru'uya, it would only be a shchita ru'uya b'tziruf with the zrika. But if you don't do the zrika, then the shchita is nothing, because it wasn't matter the basa ba'achila. Well, if that's the case, mi'idna de kashachit, at the time that this guy goes ahead and he does the shchita, you don't know yet whether the shchita is going to be usher or not. Why do you know if the shchita is going to be usher or not? Because you have to let it play out. You have to see whether it's going to be a zrika or not. Well, if that's the case, in order to get malchus, you have to get asra. And when the edom are masra, the person doing the aver, they have to know for sure whether he's being over the isna. Can't be any suffix. It's what's known as asra suffix. Mi'idna de kashach adavi asra suffix. Asra suffix leishma asra. Rav Hamnuna held that. Reb Shimon held that asra suffix leishma asra, and that's what Reb Shimon meant to say. Avada Reb Shimon held that shchitas kotchim is a shchita ruya, albeit with his rika, and that's where it's negay that price that the Reb Shimon holds. That if you shechted the mother kotchim b'fnim, and now you went ahead and shechted the child kotchim b'chutz, you're not going to be chayiv kares. You'll only be chayv alois na say Reb Shimon l'shita. So what did Rav Hamnuna mean when he said Oy Reb Shimon? Vos flake Reb Shimon zogen? Something a little different, close, but not mamish there. Ein malchus oisav es b'nei noyeg b'kotchem. And he was talking about when you're shechting the child. The child was kotchem. The mother was either kotchem or not kotchem. I don't even care. It's the child that I'm focusing on. That if the child is kotchem, you can't get malchus. You know why you can't get malchus? Because it's asra suffix. I mean that asra suffix. You never, ever going to be able to give the person asra, and if you can't give the person asra, well, if you can't give him asra, then obviously you can't get malchus. Says the Gemara, va'oz the Rava l'tameh. When Rava said this pshat and what Rav Hamnuna used to say in the name of Rav Shimon, he's lishitas, because Rava once made a statement which is mamish this. The Amar Rava said, and again, this Rava was also going in the world of Rav Shimon that holds shchita she'eina ruya lo yishma shchita. He said, Hi chulun ubna shlamim. In the event that you have a mother and a child, behemoths, and the mother was chulin, and the child was a shlamim, shachat chulin. In the event that somebody would shach the chulin, shachat shlamim, and then go ahead and shach the shlamim pater, he would be pater from malchus in the world of Rav Shimon. If it was shlamim chulin, if somebody shechted the shlamim and now wants to go in and shech the chulin, chayev, you would be chayev. What's the difference? Difference is pashut. If you shecht mother of Chulin, and now the Oisei Vespinoi is going to be Chalde Shchita Asura is the second one. That's going to be on the kachim. You can't give Hasra, because it's going to be Hasra Safik. How do you know there's going to be a Zrika after the Shchita? Hasra Safik Loishma Hasra. Therefore, in Reb Shimon's world, you're going to be Potter. If it happened in the reverse order, then already you're going to be Chayiv. This is all Rava Lishitasai. By the way, we just learned the Gemara the way the Gemara is written in front of us, right? We just read out of a Talmud Bavli. If you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says that this girsa is a girsa mishubeshes. He says kasha mati, the girsa, but the kashali. Rashi asks a kasha, and if you look at the last line of Rashi, you don't see this every day. Upirish mishubishu. He said this whole shtickle Torah that made it into the Gemara, I don't believe was written by Ravina Rav Ashi, right? I don't think this is Rav Achabre the Rava. I think this is a pirish mishubish, but Rashi says I have to hand it to whoever it is wrote it because he was made Adam Charif or Mefulful. So, right, if you're good enough that your comment somehow was mistaken for the Gemara, so that's pretty impressive. So whoever made this pirish, that somehow, right, if we write Hagoyis on the side of the Gemara, no one's going to mistakenly throw it into like something Rav Chizda said. But whoever this person was an Adam Charif or Mefulful, Zok Tehilger Rashi. But the it's not Pshat in the Gemara. Rashi has a different Pshat, Ayin Sham, but I think it's fair to go through the Gemara the way it's written. Rashi's Pshat is very, very similar. It's not a Mapech and the Zugya Ayin Sham. What's actually, by the way, even more interesting is that after Rashi says that he doesn't think this is the Pshat in the Gemara, if you look at the last 5 lines of Rashi on the Gemara, Rashi explains the Gemara based on the way we have it. Right? In Rashi's own Pshat, the Gemara doesn't say a word about Asra Safik. That's the part of the Gemara that was thrown in. The whole Asra Safik part of this, Rashi says, was not really part of the Gemara. It was someone's pirish in the Gemara, but it was a good Pshat. It was mefulful v'char, but it's not the real Pshat. And the Gemara never said anything about Asra Safik. And then if you go through every Rashi afterwards, right? V'azra Abdullah Tameh, Damashchitas Oisev Esbenai, Asra Safiku, next Rashi, V'achachachat Shlamim Baybayah, Patad Asra Safiku. So Rashi keeps on going back to the Asra Safik, which is the Pshat that Rashi says not even the real Pshat. So Rashi keeps on being mefarish this Adam Charif from a full. But the bottom line is Rashi himself does have a different Pshat, although Rashi seems to very much work with the Pshat of this Adam Charif from a full Yehesef Soisav Doivos Bekever. But the bottom line is just to put a little bit of a ribbon on this part of Daf Amar Rava. One more halacha that Rava said. He Chulin ubna Oila. Again, this is all in the world of Reb Shimon. In the event that you have a mother and a child, the mother was Chulin and the child was an Oila. So let me buy it. It goes without saying, Shachat Chulin v'achach Shachat Oila the Pater. If you would check first the mother that's Chulin, then the child that's an Oila, you would be Pater. Why would you be Pater? Because Hasra Safik Loishma Hasra, and Shimon holds Shchita Sheni Ru Loishma Shchita. So you have to have the Zrika. So if you have to have the Zrika, you don't know if you're going to have the Zrika at the time of the Shchita. Therefore, you can't get Malchus. So that's Pasha, right? Because that's no different than the previous Rava of Hi Chulin Ubna Shlaven. The fact that it's an Oila is Bechlal Masayah Mother. Here's the chiddush. When it comes to an oila, if you would check the oila va'achakach shachat chulin, and afterwards you would check the chulin, pater, even then you would be pater. And the reason is because shchita kamaisa lav shchita basachiloye. Because the shchita of an oila zokt rava, what a chiddush, is b'chlal not a shchita oila according to Reb Shimon. You know why? Because oila is also ba'achila, so it's not mater at ba'achila. I mean that it's not mater at ba'achila, so it's for that reason it's never going to be a shchita oila. Shchita's kachim, that's muta ba'achila. So then B'tzirif Tizrika al Kopanim will make it into a Shchita Ruya. But a Shchita Zoyla is never going to be Muta B'achila. If it's never going to be Muta B'achila, it's not going to be okay. So the Gemara, this Gemara is half of a fellow of Rabbi Yaakov. I'm Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yaakov said the name Rabbi Yechanan. I disagree. Achilas Mizbeach Shma Achila. The Achila of a Mizbeach is considered an Achila. My time of the Makra, because the pasuk says in the Parasha Pigel, V'm Hei Ochel Yei Ochel Mi Psar Zevach Shlama B'Shtei Achilas Akas Medaber Ech Achila Zal Ech Achila Zuzech. Everyone knows this is of course the Makar to the Sugya of Pigel. So tucked away over here in Chulin Pei Aleph on the days, the Gemara has a little bit of a shaila. In Reb Shimon's world of Shchita Sheni Ruya, Shchita has to be Matabas B'Achila. What about the Shchita's Kachim of a Karban Oila? Assuming Shchita's Oila is considered, or Shchita's Kachim is considered a Shchita Ruya. But what about an Oila? Why Oila different? Because Oila is never Matabas B'Achila. So it comes out this Shchita was never Matabas B'Achila. Or maybe no. Being that there's an Achilas Mizbeach, that's Eichet an Achila. Right? We always talk about Achilas Mizbeach. This Gemara is like a little bit of a shail of how far that goes. There's kinds of achilas that goes to the point that in Reb Shimon's world, I see it a shchita that's matam achila or not. Either way, this concludes part 2 of the daf. What was part 2 of the daf? Rav Hamnuna version 1.0, Rav Hamnuna version 2.0. Very much a continuation of daf pei, which discuss Reb Shimon, who has a sheet of Shchita in Ruya, Loishma Shchita. What about Shchitas Kachim? How do you treat Shchitas Kachim? There's a Havamim that all Shchitas Kachim is Shchita Shein Ruya. Because the Shchita itself is not matter, it's the Shchita together with the Zrika, but being that the Shchita itself is not matter, could be every single Shchitas Kachim would be considered a Shchita Shein Ruya. That was Rav Amnuna version 1.0. Rava asked a Bomba Kasha from a Braisa to prove that there's no way in the world that could be the case, stating that what did emerge, even in Rava's world, which is really Rav Hamnuna version 2.0, and that is that as much as a shchita of kachim is a shchita ruya, but in the event that the second behema that you're shechting is kachim, whether the mother is chulin or whether the mother is kachim, but you couldn't get malchus in Reb Shimon's world, and the reason you wouldn't be able to get malchus because you needed to be a shchita ruya. It's only a shchita ruya when you do this rika. Right? Again, according to Chum is not a problem because the shchita is the shchita is the shchita. It's only Reb Shimon's world. That Reb Shimon holds it has to be ruya. It's only going to be ruya nach des rika. Right now it's asra suffik, and asra suffik is lo yishma ha-asra. Either way. Part 3 of the daf. That's a new Mishnah, but really, it's an old sukkah because it's the topic of the last few dafin. This is the Makar, this is ground zero for Shittas Reb Shimon throughout Shas, who holds that Shchita she'ena ruya lo yishma Shchita. So, Okteilige Mishnah. Hashoichet. If somebody shechts a behemov in imtza treifa, and it was a treifa, hashoichet avodah zara. Or if somebody Rachmana litzlan shechted and he had in mind avodah zara, vehashoichet paras chatas. Or if somebody shechted the para aduma, v'shar haniskal. Or you have a shara niskal above a kama fame, and somebody goes ahead and shechts it for egla arufa. Or if somebody shechts the egla arufa, Reb Shimon says, then in all of these cases, there's going to be no iser oisay ves benai. The chachamim mechayvim, and the chachamim say, no, you're going to be chayv. What's the machlokes? The tzad hashava between hashoichet v'nimtza treifa, hashoichet avodah zara, hashoichet para aduma, shara niskal, and egla arufa is that you can't eat the basar. The tzad hashav is all 5 of these shchitas did not do what a shchita is supposed to do. It was not mata the basa b'achila. Thus, it's a shchita she'eni ruya. This is shchitas Reb Shimon, that shchita she'eni ruya lo yishma shchita, as it translates the parak oisav es benoi. Oisav es benoi is lo yishchatu b'yoyim echad. If it's not a shchita, then you weren't over the isner, right? To kill a mother and a child, that the Torah never said is also. It's lo yishchatu b'yoyim echad. And to the extent that it doesn't check off the box of shchita because it was not mata the basa b'achila, it's not going to be an ish. Chamim mechayvim, chamim hold, the shchita she'eni ruya. Ishma shchita. Hashoich ben esnavlo b'yadei. What would be if somebody was shechting and without intention he rendered the animal in a vela? So it wasn't nimtza treifa, but he botched up on one of the 5 halachas l'Moshe Messina that govern the laws in shchita. Or he didn't do it shalei b'kavana, but he did it b'kavana. V'hanoicher, v'ma'aker, potter. In these cases, you're potter mishum oisav es benai, because here, avada, it's not a shchita. And everybody agrees if it's not a shchita, it's not subject to oisav es benai. The machlokes is, what if it's a shchita, but it's in a ruy? Shchita in a shruy, shma shchita, lo shma shchita, that's machlokes of Shimon the Chacham. But if it's not a shchita, it's not a shchita. So to the extent that it ended up being in a vela, hashoich v'nesnav l'b'yadei, where it happened shalei b'kavana, or it was anoichem ma'aker, where it happened midas. So Rashi explains the difference between nisnav l'biyadoi and anoicha v'ma'aker. In these cases, according to everybody, even according to the Chachamim, you're going to be pater from oisai ve'es benai. So the Mishnah gave 5 examples of shchita she'eni ruya, we have this machlokes between Reb Shimon and Chacham. One of them was hashoich avodah zara. So what happens if somebody shechts avodah zara? According to Reb Shimon, we're not having the oisa ves benai conversation because shchita she'eni ruya lo yishma shchita, and hashoich avodah zara is asabana. According to the Chachamim, we are having the oisa ves benai conversation because shchita she'eni ruya yishma shchita. Hence, what does it sound like? If somebody shechts avodah zara and he shechts benai, bitai, mother, father, the halacha is you're going to be over the Issa Oisav Esbenah, you're going to get Malchus. Stating there, Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Reb Shimon ben Lakish said, Lo Shanu, the only time this is true, that according to the Chachamim, not Reb Shimon, according to the Chachamim, Yechayev Malchus for Oisav Esbenah, when you sheich avodah zara, that's only true. Ela sheshachat rishon avodah zara v'sheni l'shulchanai. If the first one was the one avodah zara, and it was the second one that you did l'shulchanai just to eat, aval rishon l'shulchanai. But let's say the first one you got right, v'sheni avodah zara. The second one was avodah zara, pater. Even the chachamim agree you're going to be pater from malchus, and the reason is the kamle b'derabimine. Because meaning that if somebody shechs avodah zara is chayiv misa, so you can't be also chayiv malchus at the same time because of the halacha of kamle b'derabimine. Meaning, Hashoichel avodah zara, machlokes of Shimon and Chachamim. Which one of the animals was he shoichel avodah zara? Was it the first animal or the second animal? Right? Doesn't matter mother or child. What matters is first or second. Was it the first one? Or was it the second one? The Mishnah didn't tell me. It's an important piece of information that I need to know right before you run with this halacha. So Rish Lakish the Amayr was mefarish the Mishnah, and he said that the only time the Chachamim said you're going to be chayiv malchus is if the first one was avodah zara. But if the second one was avodah zara, you're not going to be chayiv malchus. You know why? Not because it's a shechita sheni rui. Chum don't subscribe to that, but it's because kam lebederabimine. If the second one is avodah zara, so how can you be mechayiv malchus right now for this shechita avodah zara? Being that I'm chayiv misa for this shechita l'avodah zara. Amalei Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Yechon, Rish Lakish said, and you know he's not going to agree, right? So he said, Zu, what you just said, afilu tinoikesh abeis rabim yoy denoisa. Which, by the way, means that really Rabbi Yechon does agree, but he found an angle. The angle was, seriously, this is what you're telling me? Tinoikesh abeis rabim. He says, go to a child, say, psoikli psukech. He'll be able to tell you this. Every little child knows this halacha. Hello. If you want to comment on the Mishnah, let me tell you what the comment should be. I hold that there is an aikimta where if the second one was l'avodah zara, you're actually going to be chayiv. What's the case? The case would be where you gave asra mishum oisav esbenai, where there was asra that was given for oisav esbenai, there was no asra for avodah zara. You can't be chayiv malchus unless you get asra. You can't be chayiv misa unless there was asra. What would be if somebody shechted the second animal, oisav esbenai, l'shem avodah zara, but there was no hasra l'avodah zara, but there was hasra l'oisav esbenai? Says Rabbi Yochanan, over there, kamla b'derabim, and it gets thrown out the window. Because as much as there's a halach of kamla b'derabim, and that's only when you're getting misas bezin. Over here, you're not getting misas bezin because there was no astral misas bezin. So being that you're not getting the misas bezin, over here, if there was astral malchus, you would get malchus. In other words, Rish Lakish, you're saying, lo yishanu ela sheshachad rishon l'avodah zara v'sheni l'shulchani. Ava rishon l'shulchani v'sheni l'avodah zara patur the kamla b'derabim minei. In a regular case, says Rabbi Yochanan, duh, everyone knows that. This, afilu tunoike shal beis rabim yoyden. This is something that everyone in the world knows. I'll tell you a chiddush that I'm not even so sure it sounds like you agree with. I'm not sure. And that is that there is a hichatimsa with the sheni was avodah zara, and you're going to be chayiv malchus. There was no asral avodah zara, but there was no asral malchus. For Reb Shimon Lakish heard what the Rebbe said, and he said, I disagree with you. I hold that in your case, where there was hasral malchus, but there wasn't asral avodah zara, you're still not going to be chayiv malchus. What do you mean? Not getting misa? So there's no kameh b'derabim, because kiv the chiasru be pater, being that had there been asra misa, you would have been pater from malchus. Chiasru be nami pater. Even if you didn't get asra misa, you're going to be pater either. No, as Rish Lakish said, I hold that if you do a misa that could have, would have, should have came with a chiyav misas bezin, even if bepayil it's not coming with a chiyav misas bezin, why not? Because there was no Asra Misa. But being that this is a Maisna that carries with it a punishment of Misa, albeit if it could check off certain boxes, meet certain prerequisites and criteria, even if you can't check off those boxes, you're always going to be Pater. Says the Gemara, V'azdu l'tamay. This machloikis between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. What is the machloikis? Rabbi Yochanan holds that although there's a din kamle b'derabim in it, but that's only true if you're getting the Einish HaChamar. But if there was no Asra Misa, and you didn't have Eresh by Malchus, and you got Asra Malchus, you're going to get Malchus. Thus, there's a hechatimsa to be a sheichel avodah zara and to be chayiv for oisav esbenai. Rish Lakish holds no, being that if you had asra, you would have been pater from malchus and you would have been chayiv misa, so therefore you're always going to be pater from malchus. This machlokes is litamai. Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel. Amari said chayiv misa shoygegin v'chayiv malchus shoygegin. If someone did an aveira for which he chayiv misa, but did a b'shoigig, or someone did an aver for which he chayiv malchus, but did a b'shoigig. The davar achar, and while he did the chayiv misa shoigigin, or while he did the chayiv malchus shoigigin, he did a davar achar. So what's the davar achar? So Rashi explains, when he did the chayiv misa shoigigin, he also did a chayiv malchus or a chayiv mammon. And when he did the chayiv malchus shoigigin, he also did a chayiv mammon. Got it? So chayve misa shoygigin with the davar achar, such as something less chomer than misa, malchus or mammon, or chayve malchus shoygigin with something less chomer than malchus, which is mammon, right? It's misa, malchus, mammon in the pecking order. So chayve misa shoygigin v'davar achar, chayve malchus shoygigin v'davar achar. So what happens now? Do you get the oyne shakal? Do you not get the oyne shakal? So if it wasn't b'shoygig, so for sure you wouldn't get the oyne shakal. Kamle b'drabamine. But being that what you did, the oyne shachamor is not included because you did it b'shoygig. The chayve mises was b'shoygig. The chayve malchus was b'shoygig. So could I be chayiv for the davar achar or not? Rabbi Yechon says yes. You're going to be chayiv for the oyne shakal. Reish Lakish says you're going to be patreich. Rabbi says you're chayiv for the oyne shakal. You know why? The halay atzrebe. There's no kamle b'derabamine. So why shouldn't you be chayiv for the oyne shakal? Reish Lakish says you pat keep the chiyasrei pat. Being that had you done it b'mesid or had there been hasra, you would have been chayiv. Chiyasrei nami pater. So if you didn't get hasra, right? By the way, we're interchanging shoygig mezid versus hasra and no hasra. That's the same difference. The point is that being that had you done it in a way where it was been mezin and there was hasra, you would have been chayiv. So now you're going to be pater as well. Bottom line is, you see, this is an age-old machlokes between Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish. Chayve misa shoygigin, chayve malchus shoygigin. Are you pater from the oyne shakal or chayiv from the oyne shakal? Do you say kamle? Do you not say kamle? Rabbi Yochanan holds you chayiv. That's why Rabbi Yochanan lishni tasai. That's where Rabbi Yochanan Shitasei said it's possible to shecht l'avodah zara oisei v'espinai and get malchus, where there was no asra l'misa, but there was asra l'malchus. Reish Lakish didn't learn that way, because Reish Lakish is l'Shitasei. Reish Lakish holds chayve misa shoygin, chayve malchus shoygin a potter. Why? Because being that had you done it b'mezid, had you done it with asra, you would have been potter. So even if you don't do it b'mezid, you don't do it with asra, you're still going to be potter. This machlokes Rabbi Yechon Reish Lakish al l'Shitasei. Says the Gemara b'tzricha. I needed both machlokes in between Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish. I needed the machlokes in our sugya b'negeya hashaychel avodah zara oisav esbenai, and this more general machlokes. Why? Ashmin baha. Because that I only had the Mishnah by us, our sugya of Hashaychel avodah zara. I would have thought, how come Reb Shimon ben Lakish? Maybe it's tafk over here. Reb Shimon ben Lakish holds that even if you do it in a way where if you're not chayiv, you're still going to be potter from the oyne shakal. Aval baha. But maybe in the other case, the case of chayvim mises, shoygim b'davar achar, chayvim malchus b'davar achar, eima moidel Rabbi Yochanan, maybe be moidel Rabbi Yochanan. Now the Gemara does not explain what this means, so for this we need Rashi. So let's take a look at Rashi. Dibra maskeh b'ha kamer Reish Lakish. Had we only had the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish in our sugya, I would have thought b'ha kamer Reish Lakish the patami malchus. Over here Reish Lakish holds that even if there was no hasra l'avodah zara and there was hasra l'oisav esbenai, you're still going to be pater from malchus. Hoyel v'yesh b'shchita zu tzad misa. Because being that this shchita has a tzad misa, what does it mean a tzad misa? Had there been hasra, you would have been chayiv misa. So pakale teiros malchus mineh. That knocks out malchus even when you don't have the actual misa. All you have is a tzad misa. And the reason is the tarte begufa loy rami aleh. Because you can't give a person two oinchei haguf. Hilkach afilu loy asru be'ela misa. Even if there was no asra la misa, still like a malchus. It's not going to be malchus. But when it comes to chayvim misa shoygin and davar achar, keep going. Mammon, this has to be mammon. The chada begufa, the chada b'mamayna. Well, one einish is an einish akuf, the other is einish amam is completely different. I would think in this case you should get both. That's why I need the second machlokes to know. The Reish Lakish didn't only say is halacha where it's tarti begufa. He said even where it's one in the gufa, one in the mouth. Now there's a svara to say that maybe we say this idea of chayvim misa shoygigin are going to be pater when they're both in the guf. Meaning, to give two oinchei haguf, to give two oinchim that are so similar, is harder to do than to give two oinchim where one is beguf, one is b'mammon, when one is very not similar to the other. It's for that reason there is a svara to say that in the world of kamle b'derabamine, I'll invoke chayvim misa shoygigin, even though that's a chiddush, where the two oinchim are so similar, where it's like an easier lift to say kamle b'derabamine than when the two oinchim are different. So I only know Reish Lakish has halacha in our sugya, where the two oinchim are both oinchei aguf, one is misa, one is malchus. I would have thought there Reish Lakish has his chiddush that every single time you shaychel avodah zara, there's no oisav esbenai, even where there was no asra, because there's a concept of chayvim misa shoygigin is pater where the kamle is an easier kamle, where they're both oinchei aguf. Aval baha, what's baha? Where one is Misa and the other one is Mammon, or one is Malchus, the other is Mammon, there could be, you wouldn't say it, because that is a different type of kamle. It's a more difficult lift to say kamle, because mechatesi, you can't have an oynish aguf and an oynish amamen. So yeah, we're bepile, you're getting the mochamer the oynish. That's the end of Rashi, by the way, that we didn't see inside. There, it's pasha, you're going to say kamle b'derabimine. But where you're not getting a bepile, where there was no asra, or it was done b'shaygig there, maybe not. Bottom line is, that's why, even though I have the machlokes over here, I still need that machlokes. Okay. V'itma baha, and I only had the other machlokes. Just tell me the other machlokes. I'll know Reish Lakish holds chayvi misa shaygigin, where it's Malchus and Mammon, or Misa and Mammon. Kal v'chomer, I know where it's Malchus and Misa, but true, in Reish Lakish I would know that, but I would think, Baha kam Rabbi Yochanan, maybe Rabbi Yochanan only said his halacha over there. Aval Baha, but as it relates to our sugim and Moed Shimon ben Lakish, being that it's the same type of einish, maybe here he's Moed, again, it's an easier lift, maybe he's Moed that you're going to say, Chayim Yishoygin, and you're not going to say you're going to say the halacha of kamle b'derabimine? Tzricha, for that reason I need both cases. By the way, in just reading the Gemara inside, this was a little bit tricky, right? Because if you look at the words, the Gemara gave zero hasbara. Usually when the Gemara does a tzricha, the Gemara helps you out a little bit. Here the Gemara mamish did not get the assist, right? The Gemara mamish didn't help us, right? Yashminim baha ba kam Rav Shimon ben Lakish, aval baha imam Rabbi Yochanan. Yashminim baha ba kam Rabbi Yochanan, aval baha imam Rabbi Shem. What's baha? Baha without any hasbara. I don't even know which bahas are bahas. So Rashi was clearly very helpful over here, but either way, one last Gemara. Paras chat shchita she'ein ruya. So one of the examples in the Mishnah of shchita she'ein ruya was paras chat. Somebody goes ahead and he shechs a para aduma. It's not mutar b'achila, it's asabana. As a result, it's shchita she'ein ruya. It's negate the sugis over here of oisav esmen. Afraid is that true? That paras chatas is a shchita she'ein ruya. Vatani we learned to the brayse. Reb Shimon said, "Para metama tumas oichlin." A paras metama tumas oichlin. Now Rashi says that the background to this Reb Shimon is paras daftes on the base, where Reb Shimon has a shita that, as it relates to tumas oichlin, that only oichel she'ata yochel lahachiloi lacherim is koroi oichel. But any oichel that you can't be meichel lacherim, which means it's asa b'hana, that type of oichel is not subject to tumas oichlin. Stating that, Reb Shimon said, para metama tumas oichel. The para aduma, in as much as it's not mutar b'hana, and you can't be meichel lacherim, but at the same time, it is subject to tumas oichlin, and the reason is, hayol v'hisala sha'asakosh. Being that it had a sha'asakosh, meaning there was a time that it was possible to eat the basa of the paradum. When is that true? Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Lakish explained, Reb Shimon fleg zogen, it's another Reb Shimon fleg zogen, para niftas lagabe marachta, that when the paraduma was on top of the maracha, when it was being burnt, before the sreifa, if you wanted to be poidet, even after the shchita, you were able to be poidet. And that's enough for it to be considered a shas hakosh. And that's why, even though Reb Shimon has a shita that oichel she'at yochel achila acherim lo yishma oichel, it's not subject to tumas oichlin, but to the extent that if you want to be poidet, you could be poidet, that would be enough for it to have a shivas of oichel. So what's the Gemara's kasha? Gemara's kasha, pashta kasha. If Reb Shimon holds that the para aduma is considered oichel shata yochel achiloi, that means the shchita had to have been a shchita ruya. Because you can't have oichel shata yochel achiloi on a shchita. The shchita is not matter it, but you have to say, Amr hay Reb Shimon para niftis agabe marachta. And that's enough for it to be considered oichel shata yochel achiloi. And that must be enough for it to be considered shchita. But you can't make a yachloik on. You can't say there was no shchita, but it's considered oichel shata yochel achiloi acher. Now, really, it shouldn't be a shchita and it shouldn't be oichel shata yochel achiloi acher. But Reb Shimon already told you that para niftas agabe marachta, that's enough for it to be considered oichel shata yochel achiloi. So if it's enough for it to be considered oichel shata yochel achiloi, it has to be enough for it to be considered shchita. But then it has to be a shchita. So how could Reb Shimon include in his list of shchita she'ein ruyos paras chatos? The paras chatos has to be a shchita ruya. If it creates oichel shata yochel achiloi acherim, the by definition has to be a shchita. Reb Shem barab and Rabbi Yochanan. You're right. Paras chatos ain't a mishnah. You got to take it out of the mishnah. It's true. In as much as paras chatos be'etzem is not a shchita ruya, and you would think it should very much belong on this list, but at the same time, betafis osmekin ain't a mishnah. You have to take it out. And the reason is because there is no question in the world that even according to Reb Shimon, the shchita of a paras chatos is considered a shchita re'uya exhale. So as it relates to raid, we're already shvua shechal by Tisha B'av. So just to speak out one ha'ara, it's a very, very simple ha'ara. I don't think there's any chidushim in this ha'ara other than the hergish. And obviously, very, very much davar be'itai. That is, on Tisha B'Av, the avodah of a yid is to mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, it goes without say that if one is going to mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, he has to feel, appreciate, and at the very least, on some level, understand what exactly was lost when we lost the Beis HaMikdash. Which means that one has to appreciate what the Beis HaMikdash was in order to even get onto first base as it relates to being able to have some hakara and come to some madrega of Churban Beis HaMikdash. So what exactly was the Beis HaMikdash? Again, nothing fancy. The Rambam, in the very, very beginning of his Sefer Avodah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph of Hilchos Beis HaBchira, we've learned this Rambam together many, many times. It says, Mitzvah Saseh Lasois Bayis Lashem. There's a mitzvah Saseh to build a bayis for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Muchan, it should be prepared. Liyos makrivim by our karbanos, for us to be able to bring karbanos. V'chaygig elav shalish pamim hashana. Additionally, it should be a place that 3 times a year we'll make a chagiga, we'll convene, we'll celebrate a yontif in that place. Shenema, what's the makar to this mitzvah saseh? It says, va'asuli mikdash. V'shachanti b'soicham, that's of course the pasuk in the beginning of Parashas Truma. And says the Rambam, this is the source, that there's a mitzvah's essay deiraisa, lasis bayis lashem. What's the tachlis of it? Says the Rambam twofold. Number one, it's a makom that will be able to bring karbanis. Number two, it's a place that 3 times a year will be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel. And then the Rambam, in a way that only the Rambam was able to, in such a systematic, methodical way, goes on, and he describes the history of how the Yidden were mekayim this mitzvah. Moshe Rabbeinu with Betzalel built a Mishkan when the Yidden were in the Midbar, and then for 14 years, when the Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael in the times of Yeshua ben Nun and Elazar Kohen Gadol, that Mishkan was in Gilgal, and then it spanned close to 400 years in Shiloh, and then it was in Noiv, and then it was in Givon, and then Shlomo HaMelech built a Beis HaMikdash. It was destroyed. The Yidden were in Babel for 70 years, and then the times of Chagai, Chaya Malachi, the Anshe Knesset Gdoila, Ezra, because of the permission of the Persian Empire, they rebuilt a Beis HaMikdash that stood for 420 years. It was destroyed by the Romans, and now we're achakule b'choyim sheyavei for Mashiach to come. We're going to be zoicha to the binyan bayis shlishi that the Rambam says was described in such great detail in some of the nevuahs of the prophet Yecheskel. That's what's going on over here in the beginning of Hilchos Beis HaBchira. But the Rambam introduces the Beis HaMikdash by saying there's a mitzvah saseh to build the Beis HaMikdash. The makar is v'asul mikdash v'shachanti b'soichem. What's the purpose of the Beis HaMikdash? It has a dual purpose. Muchan liyos makrivim by karbanis, number one. V'chaygig in elav shalosh pamim b'ashana, number two. So what is the Beis HaMikdash? What don't we have? We don't have that place that we would be able to bring karbanos. Additionally, we don't have a place to come 3 times a year and spend time with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the truth is, when you ask this question, what exactly was the Beis HaMikdash? The answer is even simpler than that. Now, this is the first Rambam in Hilchos Beis HaBchira. It's literally chapter 1, verse 1 in the world of Kachim. But it is even simpler than that. And this is an idea that we talked about last winter in the Chumash Shiurim of Truma. We got stuck somewhere in the middle of Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakel, and Pekudei. This is also B'chal Yoy Machakol Sheyavoy. But that is that there are 5 parishes in the Torah that are dedicated to the Melechus HaMishkan, right? Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakel, Pekudei. And they immediately follow Parshas Yisro and Mishpatim. So let's just chazer over a little bit. The Yidden left Mitzrayim. And then in Parshas Yisro and in Parshas Mishpatim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Klal Yisrael the Torah. Klal Yisrael said Nasa v'Nishma. We became the Am Segula. We became the Mamleches Goyanim v'Goy Kadosh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, because of the fact that you accepted the Torah, I'm going to have a very special relationship with you. And then the Parshas Mishpatim, right? That's where it says Nasa v'Nishma. That's where there's a special bris that's made. But the theme of Yisro and Mishpatim are that we became the nation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. what immediately follows? Parshas Yisrael Mishpatim. It's the tzivui for the Melechus HaMishkan. The Ramban, right in the beginning of Parshas Truma, says that it's not a coincidence that the first real part of the Torah, immediately after Klal Yisrael became a nation, is the Parsha of the Mishkan. And says the Ramban, the reason is because as soon as Klal Yisrael became the nation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu became our Melech, it was necessary for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have a place amongst us to be able to live, a place that he would be able to call home. V'lochein, says the Ramban, Tziva Tchila, the first thing that the Eibishter commanded us was Al Dvar HaMishkan, Sheyeh Lo Bayis B'Soichem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should have a house in our midst. Mukdash L'Shmai, V'sham Yedaber Moshe, V'yitzav B'nei Yisrael. So says Ramban that if we're going to have this relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be Malkeinu, he's going to be our Melech, our Koenig. Well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs a palace, just like every king has a palace. He needs a place that he's going to be able to live. And that's why right after Yisrael Mishpatim, which is all Mitchila Vatsoif, we went through this Be'in when we learned the Chumash here. It's Mitchila Vatsoif, the story of Kabbalah Satira. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'yikli Truma, V'asuli Mikdash. Now's the time, I need a palace. And therefore you have to make a place where I'm going to be able to live in your midst. Says Ramban, when you understand that, you understand why the first thing that's mentioned in the tzivuyim of the Melechus HaMishkan was the Aron. Why is the Aron mentioned first? Says the Ramban, because what was the Mishkan at its core? It was the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to reside, be Mashra Shechinasai. That's a fancy way of saying living. It's the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to live in our midst. Where was the Shechina? It was the Aron. So being, says the Ramban, that the Iker of the whole Mishkan is the Shechina, V'hine Iker HaChefetz BeMishkan Hu Makam Menuchas HaShechina. Shehu HaAron. K'may shenemar, V'nayadati l'chasham v'dibarti idchem me'al HaKaparis. Al kein hiktem HaAron v'HaKaparis bekan. This is the tachlis. This is the main point of the Mishkan. That the Eibishter should be Mashra Shechina. Where is the Shashreis HaShechina? It's Dafka by the Alright, and it's for that reason. What's the first thing that's mentioned? The first thing that's mentioned is Dar. And the truth is, if you go through the Rambans and Parshas Truma and Tetzava, it's a theme. Just to read one more lashon from the Ramban. Amar v'asuli mikdash, bayis, v'kelim, ki mikdash melech ubeis mamlacha, v'shachanti b'soicham, b'bayis u'bakisei ha'kovod, asher yasu lisham. The idea is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, make a mikdash for me, ki mikdash melech ubeis mamlacha. Every king has a palace, so I want a palace as well. And really, if you go through all the Rishonim, starting with Ramban like we did, but you work through the Sfornas and the Rashbams, they explain the pshutei shel mikra of the Mishkan al derech zeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I want a palace, and I want my palace to look like palaces are supposed to look. Okay, so what do you think a palace has inside? There's a table where you can have food. There's a shulchan. You need light, right? You need light. So there's going to be a menorah. The menorah is going to have light. How's the HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to eat? You're going to have to feed HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kaviyochel. How do you feed HaKadosh Baruch Hu? There's going to be a mizbeach, and you're going to put the food on the mizbeach, and a fire is going to come, and that's going to consume the food. We just had in today's daf. B'shtei achilos hakasa medaber, echad achilos adam, v'echad achilos mizbeach. You're going to feed HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak. Oh, by the way, where does HaKadosh Baruch Hu live within the palace? L'fnai v'l'fnim. Where does anybody live in his house? Right? There's a cheder penima. There's a l'fnai v'l'fnim. And the l'fnai v'l'fnim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like any melech. Right? What did Esther tell Achashverosh? I can't go to the king. Achas domei lahamis. Right? Achas lahamis. It's not something you're allowed to do. The Kohen Gadol, on the holiest day of the year, he's allowed to go in mamish be'ema be'yira be'reses u'bezeya. Because that's the mamish the cheder penima. That's where the Shechina lives. That is literally where the king is. That's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. But if you go through the Rishonim all say it. In the Pshutei Shel Mikra, you want to know what the Mishkan was? You want to know what's going on over here? This is a palace. It's a place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to go ahead and to be Mashra Shechinaseh, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to live together with Klal Yisrael. He wants Shechina b'tachtoinim. I want to be together with you. I want to have a place to live. I want a place to call home. And that place is going to be the Mishkan. It's going to be the Mikdash. And I want you to set it up with the tzura of what a house is supposed to look like. Right? Vasisa Shulchan, reading the Sforna. You're making some sort of kisei l'shchina. The Shulchan had ka'arois and kapois. Ka'arois of the kapois says the Sforna, hayuduos az l'shulchan melachim. The Rashbam says that we know the menorah had to be noichach hashulchan. Why did it be noichach hashulchan? So the Rashbam says a lashon, you know why it has to be there? L'hayr ala shulchan, because how are you going to see? The shulchan, I'm supposed to eat on the shulchan. If I don't have a light shining on the, you eat on the shulchan. I didn't know you ate on the shulchan. I thought the shulchan was all about the sugis and mesechtes menachis. You have the bezichel of vayna, and you have to make sure you don't have a machshavas pigel, and there's dailacha, and there's all that. Yeah, that's true. That's true in Teresh Peh. But there's an Ein Mikra Yotzim Midei Pshutai that's going on over here. And the Ein Mikra Yotzim Midei Pshutai is the Eibishter lives here. That's what it means, Shechina B'tachtoinim. That's what it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mashra Shechinasai. And being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu lives here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs a Shulchan, he needs a Menorah, he needs a Mizbeach, a Cheder Penima, Lefnai V'Lefnim. That's what the Aron is, and that's why no one's allowed to go there, because you can imagine walking into the Lefnai V'Lefnim of the king. Yeah, but of course you can't do that. And that's set up 100% in that surah. And again, you go through the Rishonim, they explain all the nuances in the world of Pshutei Shal Mikra al Derech Zeh. Which means that when you think about what the Beis HaMikdash was, it's true, it was a place that was Muchan Lias Makrivim by our Karbanos. It's true, it was a place of Chaging and Elav Shalosh Pamim Bashana. But even before that, you know what it was? It was a palace that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was living in our midst. And what was the place that he called home? It was the Beis HaMikdash. And the truth is, the Rambam says it. Let's go back to the Rambam. Mitzvah saseh, lasses bayis lashem. Right, just stop there. It starts getting very fancy on the next line. Muchan lias makrivim by karbanos, v'chayking in elo shalish pamim bashana. Mitzvah saseh, what is it at its core? Live nice. It's bayis lashem. Build a house for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to build a house for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, what happened was, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's house was destroyed. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu's house was destroyed, what that means is that we no longer have HaKadosh Baruch Hu living amongst us. That's what that means. So what does it mean that we lost the Beis HaMikdash? Yeah, it means that we don't have a place to bring karbanos. It means we don't have a place to be Oler Regal. But even before that, on its simplest, right, the most obvious things are the things we overlook. In its simplest and most obvious level, what it means is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu no longer has a house amongst us. There was a time that we were a nation that had a king who had a house amongst us that we can look towards and feel protected and see him, know that he's with us. That house no longer exists. It was destroyed. And because of the fact that it was destroyed, we now mourn that. And that's really on its simplest level, what we're mourning when we think about Churban Beis HaMikdash. But I think there's a little bit of an oimek over here. It's so pashut, but it's an oimek. You know, the Svarim HaKadoshim, the Mekubalim, the Chassidische Svarim, they all talk about that if a person wants his tefillah to be neskabel, so when he davens, he shouldn't just think about himself. He should think about Kodesh Baruch Hu. Chaim Volozhin Nefesh HaChaim is meirich in this, that a person's tefillah is not supposed to be that rifa'enu because I need a refuah. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I know that you're mishtatif in my tzar, and I know how much pain you have over the Chaylei Yisrael, so memela rifa'enu. Right? It's supposed to be with a focus towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And true, this is a madrega. It's a very big madrega. For a person to shtal sich Shemona Esrei and to think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's a very high madrega. Who's shaykh to that? Right? Yechidim Ashai. This is the madrega of Nefesh HaChaim. It's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to come to it a little bit, but it's a very hard thing to do. But I think as it relates to the Churban, if you think about it for a second, you frame it in the right way, it's actually pasha. I don't think it's so hard. I really don't think it's so hard. When we realized that the Beis HaMikdash was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's home, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to have a home amongst us, this was something that the Ratzon Elikim was very much to have. The idea of Shechina B'tachtoinim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to have a place amongst us. And right now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is homeless. How is that not something that we can't feel at least a little bit? Right? I'm just haga ba'atzmacha. Imagine you know a person, he's a p'sagrosik gvir. He has a house here and a house there and a shina this and a shina that. And you found out that his father's homeless. His father literally sleeps on the park bench and he eats out of the garbage can. What would you think about that guy? That guy's a meshukitz, he's a meturif, he's a menuvel. I don't want to be in this guy's dalaramis. He's the sickest person in the world. You wouldn't go near this guy. This person would not be able to show his face in public. He wouldn't be able to. I mean, what kind of person is this? This guy is mamish, he has everything that he wants and everything that he needs, and his father's homeless? That's lamaisa what we are right now, Gauls. That's what we are in Galus. We have what we need, Baruch Hashem, Marke de Islay, Marke de Islay, and we have a Father in heaven that's literally homeless. He's homeless. I mean, go to the Kaisel. We've all been there. It's Chulin Hilchuba on steroids, literally. I mean, imagine that's what your dining room looked like. You wouldn't walk in and make kiddush in your house, right? You would call your shvaga, I'm moving in for the weekend. You would go anywhere near that place. And yet this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's house. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's homeless right now. That's what Churban Beis HaMikdash means. So we could look at it from a selfish perspective. Oh, I wish I had a kohenik that lived in my midst. I wish I had a place to bring a carbon chatas to get kapara. I wish I can go be oile regel 3 times a year. We all want to go to Eretz 3 times a year for Yontif, right? It's on everyone's bucket list. I wish I could do that. It's very nice. It's true. It's a reina hergish. That's what you're supposed to feel in Tisha B'Av. Halavai, we should feel that. Oh, but the emes is, it's selfish. It's very, very selfish. If we're makir of Vinu Malkenu on the most elementary, basic level, a yid should be able, al derech hapshat, you don't have to be a greisa mekubal for this. Al derech hapshat, he should be able to give a krecht that my father is homeless. And you know what? I'm embarrassed that my father's homeless. And at the very least, let me make a shtickle shtadlis. Let me do a little bit of a little something, so that maybe my father won't be so homeless. At least I could show my face in shul. I could walk into this medrash via shiny yid and not feel that Baruch Hashem, se geit mich ganz fein, but the fact that my father's sleeping on a park bench is... It's busy bizyonis if you think about it. And that's mamash the matzav of the Yid in Golas. And that's a little bit of that hergish that the Yid is supposed to feel. So avada, we can't bring karbonis. Avada, we can't be choygigel of shalish pamim mashana. Avada, we don't even have a melech that's living in our midst, which is the pshutei shel mikra of what the Mishkan was all about. But it's even deeper than that. And it's even simpler than that. We have a father who's homeless. And he's begging us to build him a house. And it's in our power. We can build him a house. It's something we can do. We actually have the power. We have the control. Now, we can't control maybe what the other guy does, but we can control what we do. And as a result, that's the avodah. The avodah is to feel a little bit the tsar of the Shechina. It's to feel and recognize and on some level internalize that our father is homeless right now. And he's living in a house that's destroyed, that's dilapidated, where it's shualim hilchubai. I mean, we can't look to the top left corner of the Kaisel. Davish has to live there. Davish is homeless right now. It's something that is very, very painful for him. And this is something that on some level, we're obligated to go ahead and to try to be makir. I just want to end, and we mentioned this in Chumash and Parshas Noach, but I think it's kedai now, David Be'itai, to mention it again. And that is in the Sefer Lekutei Chevra Chayim. For a feivel plout, he brings that every single year in Parshas Noach, the Heilige Chassam Sofer used to say the following. He used to say that the pasuk says, "Es kashti nosati ba'anan." After the Mabul, so Kadosh Baruch Hu shows Noach the rainbow, and he says the rainbow is going to be a symbol that I'm never going to bring a Mabul again. And then he said, "Es kashti nosati ba'anan v'hoisalo is bris beinu uveina oris." So the Heilige Chassam Sofer, when he was fearing Tish every year in Parshas Noach, he would say that the word kashti is Rosh Tevis, Kedushasi, Shmi, Toirasi and Yamini. That's what it stands for. Kedushasi, Shmi, Toirasi and Yamini. And the Chassam Sofer, although he would say this every year, Parshas Noach, but said the Lekutei Chevra Chaim, he never explained what it was he meant. And the Talmidim, they tried getting out of the Chassam Sofer, what's meant the Rebbe? Like, what's the oimik over here? What exactly isn't that you're trying to say? And Lamaisa, the Chassam Sofer was never Megala. He never explained what it was that he was trying to say. But the Lekutei Chevra Chaim, who was the Talmud Muvach, the Chassam Sofer said, Avo Yogati u'motzasi dover nifla. He said, I thought about it, I heard of it, on what the Chassam Sofer must have meant, and I was oimid. I believe in what he meant. And that is, he said, if you take a look at the Torah, in Hilchas Tefillah, in Siman Kuf Chav Beis. So the Torah says as follows: V'yesh moisif and loymar. There are people that after they finish Shemona Esrei, so they add words. and they say Aseh L'man Shemecha, Aseh L'man Yeminecha, Aseh L'man Teirasecha, Aseh L'man Kedushasecha, right? This is something that we say. Says the Torah that he found in an Agada that says that any person that's makbid, and he says that he's going to be Zoichel Mekabel Pnei Shechina. This person will be Zoichel Mekabel Pnei Shechina. And the question is, what's the oimik of this? If somebody finishes Shemona Esrei and he says those words, Aseh L'man Shemecha, Aseh L'man Yeminecha, Aseh L'man Teirasecha, Aseh L'man Kedushasecha, that's somehow a guarantee that he's going to be Mekabel Pnei Shechina. So the L'kutei Chaya said the oimik is as follows. There's a pasuk in Eicha. The pasuk in Eicha is in Perek Gimel. It's pasuk Mem Daled. Sakoisa be'onon lach me'avar tefillah. The Medrash says that after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took an onon, he took a vulcan, he took a cloud, and he put it mamish underneath HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak. And you know what that cloud does? Me'avar tefillah. It doesn't allow the tefillahs to pass. Once upon a time, a person davened, he had a direct line to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Me'avar tefillah. The Eibishter made this onon to stop, to be mafsik. Now the tefillahs can't get through anymore. That there's no way for tefillahs to go through. That when a person's in a matziv where he can't get his tefillahs to go through, you know what you can do? You can have in mind the Eibishter. Don't have in mind yourself. Have in mind HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Aseh L'man Shemecha, Aseh L'man Yeminecha, Aseh L'man Teirasecha, Aseh L'man Kedushasecha. And when a person hasn't in the Eibishter, that allows his tefillahs to go back. So said the L'kutei Chaim. You know what the Chassam Sofer meant? Es kashti nosati ba'onon. I took the onon and I put the onon as a block. It's a mechitza shel barzel. The tefillahs can't go through. But if you take kashti, Rosh Tevis Kedushasi, Shmi, Teirasi, and Yemini, and you put it in the onon, that's how you get through the onon. You want to get through the onon. You want to block through all those mechitzas. You don't make it about yourself. You make it about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you can make it about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's how we get through. A krecht of not only, we wish we had a Beis HaMikdash. Not only we wish we could do the Avodah. Not only we wish we could be Eiler Regel. But a krecht that we realize HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our Father. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is homeless. He doesn't have a house. He lives amongst us. And by the way, even though Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the Beis HaKnesses, in the Beis Medrash, and Ein Lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eladal Alam Shal Alach B'Vad, we spoke about this in the Churva Shul already. This means something else. This means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and he visits. Yeah, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will spend some time as a guest. But the Eibishter doesn't want to be a guest in our house. The Eibishter wants to have his own house. That's what the Beis HaMikdash was. And that's what the Eibishter doesn't have. And that's this inyan. If a person's able to come to that a little bit, he'll be as kashti nosati ba'onon. You'll be able to get through that pasuk in Eicha of Perek Gimel, pasuk Mem Daled, which, by the way, might be the most chomer of all the psukim in Eicha, from all Haisa Kalmana and everything. Sakoisa ba'onon lach mavar tefillah. Noch alle tzoras, you don't even have a koyach tefillah. You can't even break through because there's that onon. But the Chassam Sofer was megale every year Parshas Noach that there is an Eitzah. The Eitzah is as kashti nosati ba'onon. And if we're able to tap, again, this is a great Madrega. And we can't do this on the level that the Ribnitzer was able to do it. We chop that. We can't do this on the level that the Heilige Divrei Yoel was able to do this on. But at the same time, on some level, to be able to tap into the fact, very simple, nothing fancy. We have a father, that father had a house, right now he's homeless and he's begging us to build that house for him. And Baruch Hashem, we're bekoyach to do it. Berachnius ubegashmius, we're bekoyach to do it. And it's incumbent upon us to do it, because if not, how does this make us look? How can we even walk out? Not ba'ava v'chafui rosh. And really, that's the Avelos of Tisha B'Av, that we feel it. There's one day a year we dedicate that we are ba'ava v'chafui rosh. And we appreciate the fact I'm embarrassed to show my face because of the fact that I have a father. I have a father that right now is homeless. We should talk be zoicha. We should be zoicha that the tefillah of Yerushalayim Mircha Barachim Tasha, which, by the way, you ever notice Yerushalayim Mircha Barachim Tasha, you don't say one word about Lias Makrivim by Karbanos. You don't say one word about Chaygi Ginol of Shalosh Pamim Bashana. What's it a tefillah? It's a tefillah of Yerushalayim Mircha Barachim and Tasha V'Sishka V'Saycha Kasha Diva. Nothing fancy. He wants at a house, and you lived amongst us. B'nei Yerushalayim V'nei Yerushalayim HaKodesh Meir B'Yameinu B'nei Barach Yerushalayim Mami. You don't say a word about a voice, not a kotchem digga tefillah. It's a very simple tefillah, and we could have in mind this brach and this tefillah, like Nefesh HaChaim says we're supposed to, where we have in mind that Kadosh Baruch Hu. Forget about the fact that we feel bad. I know how bitzar you are. Be mamchish this on some level, and maybe in that Paschos will be Zoicha Tes Kashti Nosati Ba'anon will be Zoicha this year finally to the real Nachem Ben Chamas Sion Bebinyan Beis HaMikdash B'mher B'Yameinu Amen.